This is a remarkable improvement. The bass response is way smoother than before. So I cleared out my room a while ago. Everything was emptier and the walls were bare on this side. So what was the effect? Basically, there was quite a bit of echo and there was quite a bit of reverberation, which you're not hearing now because I've done something to the wall. Now, in clearing my room, I wanted three things, right? I wanted it to look good. Aesthetics was important. I wanted to have ease of shooting because I film all my videos within this room, this studio. And the third was primarily I need to enjoy the room. I want to be able to enjoy and watch my movies in this room. Now, I did have the room look kind of good after cleaning out. A clean room is a good looking room, and everything had its place, everything was in its place. And it was fast for me to get to shooting because the lights are now mounted on the ceiling in a fixed place and I don't have to set it up every time I do something. Now, what was the problem? The problem was that the sound wasn't ideal. Echo was killing it. Why? Because of bare walls. Now, in a room where there are bare walls, there are echoes, right? And the sound, it keeps bouncing around the room. So when the sound comes from the left channel, it gets bounced around and it may bleed into the right side of the sound field. And what is from the surround may then get bounced around to the front. So you don't actually know where the sound is actually coming from. So basically your soundstage suffers and it is no longer clear. Now imagine if you are in a toilet, a public washroom. It gets hard for you to hear people clearly because echoes, right? The walls are always hard and they are flat. And it is in a big space, there's no soft materials around and definitely no curtains draping the place. So echoes and reverb, they're caused by flat walls and reflective surfaces. Now the other phenomenon is actually sound decay. Now you want actually the sound to decay a little bit so that it conveys a sense of energy, right? It doesn't sound so dead and unnatural. But when you watch a movie, at the point of recording, the producer has already recorded the reverberation in. The mic on location would already have recorded how the sound sounds like in that particular room. So you don't want to add in extra echoes and reverb just to make it sound livelier because that's not how it's supposed to sound like. But when you have hard surfaces, especially flat and large, even surfaces, the sound, it doesn't scatter, it gets bounced around in straight lines and its energy, it doesn't get diffused. So when a note goes off, it gets bounced around many times and you hear it many times. You're not supposed to hear it that many times. If the producer wanted you to hear the voices bounce around in a cave or a large hall, they would already have programmed it in. The room you're in should not add more of this in. So that is the problem. That was my problem with a flat wall behind me. But I already have the solution up. So these are the two things that you can do in order to solve the problem you have with your room. First, you want to break up large flat surfaces to scatter the sound, right? And the next thing you want to do is to introduce softer materials around the room to absorb the sound. So these achieve two different things, right? One is to scatter and diffuse the sound so that it loses focus, right? The other is to use softer material to absorb the sound to reduce the energy so it doesn't get bounced around that much anymore. Well, I did both. The wall paneling behind me, this slated wooden panels, is something new. It wasn't there before in the last video. I just had it done up a couple of days ago. Now, these slated panels, they are 2 feet wide and they are extremely heavy, right? Well, why I mentioned 2 feet wide? Because this wall behind me, actually, if you look at the whole entire stretch, it goes about 13 feet or so. So I needed about 7 panels to cover the whole thing. Well, I didn't install them myself. I actually had some help because each of the panel is so damn heavy. And why are they heavy? Because I use a slightly pricier material, and these wooden strips here, they are actually solid wood, right? So they are not PVC wood. So there are some versions of these kind of slatted panels which are cheaper, and they are much lighter, easier to mount on the wall, even if you are just using some screws and nails, right? But what I did was I paid for the solid wood version, because just imagine a bottle, right? If you have a bottle, this is made from plastic material, and if it is hollow, versus stepping on solid walls, it sounds different. The strips of wood, they dampen the sound as opposed to having ringing sounds, right? Where the PVC is actually hollow in the middle. So you don't want that. The wood is going to absorb more sound energy and it's going to sound sonically more inert, which is what I wanted. Now the strips of wood actually has the effect also of breaking up the flat surface of the wall, so it actually diffuses the sound at the same time. And in between the strips of wood, there is actually a layer of felt. So the felt material, which is the black parts in between the strip of woods, is a couple of millimeters thick, and it serves the function of sound absorption. So when you cover up the entire 13 feet of the wall completely, it does a pretty good job of dampening and diffusing the sound. Now the other thing I did was to introduce a large piece of furniture. Well, you are actually looking at it right here. This recliner here, I bought a leather recliner, and most recliners, they are large, right? And it helps to reduce the amount of air that your speaker has to move around, and it helps to break up the sound waves that are bouncing in the room. So in effect, it is by itself a large diffuser. It is also soft and cushy, so it helps to absorb some of those sound energy as well. So in typical fashion on my channel, I have to use frequency response charts to objectively measure out the improvements. But even before I tested and measured it out, I could already hear the difference. When I closed the door, right, it was a reassuring thud which actually came from the wall. When I speak in the room, I didn't hear the slight echoes in my voice anymore. Everything was quieter, and my voice is just coming from my mouth to my ears, and it's not bouncing around the room anymore. But that is also the one small thing that we have to deal with, right? Because so much sound energy is being absorbed now instead of being thrown around to be amplified. You do need a little bit more volume out of your system to enjoy the same perceived levels of volume that you have had before, that I've had before. So you do have to pump up the volume just a little bit. Now, let me illustrate this using the frequency response chart. Now, in the first chart, before the room treatment was done, you'll see the green lights, right? You'll see the typical Sonos sound signature with heavy bass emphasis. Now, this is coming from the Arc Ultra with 2 subs and the Era 300, which is right here. Now note that the peak of the bass is actually not coming from the sub-bass region, it is coming from just about 70 Hertz or so. Sub-bass is anywhere in the 50s or below 60s, right? Now in the second chart after the room treatment, which is the yellow chart here, you might be surprised to see that, hey, the whole curve has dropped. Now why? Because the energy is being absorbed. There's no more bouncing sounds that is reinforced, but you will note that the 70 Hertz peak is no longer there. The bass peak is now at about 40 Hertz range. This is a remarkable improvement. The bass response is way smoother than before, and you will hear the sounds from the movie producer without additional echoes and reverb being introduced in your room. Well, of course, everything is going to sound a little bit softer, so I increased the volume and I matched it to the perceived volume of what I'm used to when testing before I installed these slated wood panels. I was testing at volume 60 and now I'm at volume 68, and that's the red line chart that you are looking at here. You'll notice that the volume is back because I pumped up the volume, but the sound signature has changed. There is actually a lot more energy at the sub-bass and the bass region, even into low mids all the way from 20 Hz to 400 Hz. In the mid-range between 700 Hz to 1.3 kHz, you do get an increased response. This is going to give you better response in the human voice range. Now there's slightly less energy in the upper mid-range portion, but there is a much higher response in the treble range from 4 kHz onwards. Now, actually, when you're listening to a system, everything sounds a lot more confident and the sounds are placed exactly where you expect them to be. There's no muddled sound stage anymore. Left channel stays at the left side without bouncing around to the right side. Rear channels are distinctly heard at the rear, and overall the sound stage is just very clean and it sounds very immersive. Now, my room upgrade is finally complete. My studio is what I want it to be, with following the 3 guiding principles. The 3 guiding principles are fulfilled. It looks good, it is easy to shoot my videos in, and it sounds great. Now, without going to the extent of what I did, putting up the wooden panel and buying new furniture, what can you do? Maybe a couple of suggestions. You can move things into the room, especially if you have large pieces of furniture. If you have a drawer unit, you could put it in, break up the space a little bit, right? Throw some soft pillows around, use heavy curtains for your windows, put carpet. Carpets are extremely effective. In this studio, I do have the entire floor carpeted. Now, you might just be surprised at how much better your setup is going to sound without spending a single cent on the equipment that you have. So if you have spent quite a bit of money in setting up your system already and the hardware, don't let it go to waste. Do something about the room to make everything sound better. I'm actually enjoying the setup a lot now. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about the Sonos system that I've deployed in my room here for my movie watching and my music listening, feel free to check out any of my videos here. And I'm linking 2 of them here, and I'll see you in one of those videos.